All right, hello everybody, and welcome to our roundtable for the 17th Annual Law Department Operations Survey. Today's topic is around top challenges and KPIs and how to leverage technology for positive impact towards both. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brad Blickstein. I'm the publisher of the Annual Law Department Operations Survey and your moderator for today. We have really an outstanding faculty for you that we put together for today. We have Chase D'Agostino, who is Managing Director of Contract Solutions at FTI Consulting. Hello, Chase. Danielle Hogland, Senior Director of Global Alliances at Agiloft. Hi, Danielle.
Hello.
Diane Homolak, VP of Tech Solutions at Integreon. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Brad.
And Heath Harris, Senior Director of Applied AI at NetDocuments, and based upon the headshot I'm seeing here, some sort of movie star or something. I think he's the next Jack Reacher or something.
Thank God for Andy. Hello.
Great. So I just want to talk for a minute about the Law Department Operations Survey. We've done 17 of these now. You can see, I think, all of the covers on the bottom of this slide. And really, it's just designed to provide benchmarking, critical success factors, and really the opinions of leading legal ops professionals so that we can sort of see where the space is going and what we expect to happen and help you all do your jobs as well as you can. Helping us each year is our amazing survey advisory board. I see a couple of you have logged in for today's webinar. That's great. These are the people that not only help us ask the right questions, keep us intellectually honest, drive response, because the more data we have, the better it is for everybody. So we don't do very much for them. I mean, honestly, I think what they get is I'll buy them lunch at an event when I see them. So we do at least like to thank them publicly whenever we can. So these are some great legal ops professionals. Also, we want to thank our partners and sponsors. Some of those folks are on this call today. We love our partners and sponsors for a couple reasons, but the main one is that, they're all really smart and with a good marketplace understanding. So not only do we get the typical value that you get from sponsors for a survey like ours, but they always bring knowledge and expertise and wisdom around the space. They all employ veterans in legal ops. Again, you're looking at 4 of them right now. So we're really appreciative of our partners and our sponsors, especially the 4 of you that are here today. 4 main topics we're going to cover today, and we're going to do this. I think a lot of you have been on these webinars before with us. We're going to do these I'll share some data, explain what I think it means or what I see, and then we'll have a conversation amongst the 5 of us around what we think this means, A, to the marketplace, and B, what folks are actually doing out there. And then we'll move on. If you have questions, please feel free to post them along the way. There's a Q&A module. We all know how to use Zoom webinar by now, I hope. So pop them in the Q&A module. If it makes sense for us to ask them in line, we will. If not, we'll answer some questions at the end. These are the 4 topics: top challenges, top KPIs, leveraging tech for positive impact. And if we have time, we'll talk about reporting and metrics and demonstrating value back to your corporations. So kicking us off with top challenges, a couple data points I want to share before we start talking. One is we asked simply, what are the top 3 challenges that you currently face related to managing your function? This we find really interesting. Something I found really interesting here. For the first time ever, cost containment is not the number 1 answer. Now it's the number 2 answer, right? So there's not like a revolution going on in legal ops. But the number 1 answer is implementing business process improvements. So that is what legal departments, legal department and what we call LDOs, legal ops professionals, are struggling with. But interestingly, when we ask what they expect to face over the next 3 years, business process improvements falls way down from 45% saying that's the answer to 24%, way down. Cost becomes number 1 again. Generative AI with a bullet And this topic of obtaining new funding for new initiatives becomes an expected top four challenge. So, Heath, let's start with you. What is going on with business processes? Like, what is it? I understand why it's important. I don't understand why people think it'll be less important. Like, do they think they're going to solve it? What do you think is going on here?
Thanks so much, Brad. I do think that's interesting, and I wonder if it might be a little underestimation of just how much this change really is when it comes to what the impact of AI is. So to really sort of achieve what the value prop is for generative AI, you're talking about sort of transforming how people have worked for years and decades, right? So like how they've earned attaboys from their boss, how they've gotten promotions, and you're sort of putting that on its head and saying, now I want you to work differently and achieve success with different tools and different ways of working. So I really do think that's meaningfully transformative and sort of introduces different skill sets from like an org design and a change perspective. That's my general reaction. But I would say that it is, depending on how you look at the survey, it could be just sort of spans of control and what legal ops professionals feel they can influence from a process perspective when you're perhaps when you're in a situation where it's not as top down in terms of this is the new way that we're going to work and there's not as much sort of transformation effort that is required.
I'm really heartened to see the business process metric or challenge at the forefront, because that is the right place to start in all of this thinking. And as we look at AI coming on board, I think what this is saying to us is today we all recognize that we're going to have to address the processes, because right on its heels is going to be this push to get AI. And we're going to have to look at spend. We're going to have to look at funding. We're going to have to put the AI out there, which means we're going to have to get our processes in order this year to be able to do those things next year. So I think everybody's got their priorities in the right order. Are they going to be able to do it in the timeline of that kind of transition? It's going to be a challenge. But I think I'm heartened to see this progression, because I think it's the right thinking.
Yeah, maybe I'll just tee off that a bit. I think, if we think about the resource options that are available to legal departments, you traditionally think of, let's manage something in-house, let's manage it through outside counsel, or, the last 10, 15 years or so, can we use an alternative legal service provider? So I'm wondering if maybe with the introduction of generative AI, people are starting to think of maybe that extra lever where can we actually just truly automate a piece of this where we don't have to give it to someone. I think we'll talk later about the realities of that, and maybe that's not quite right. But perhaps if you're thinking about kind of changing the structure a bit, and maybe there is another option with generative AI, pushing AI a bit further, like do we have to revisit some of those processes? And maybe that's why people are rethinking about it. And would also explain perhaps why for 3 years from now, people are really going to think they have to spend more time managing Gen AI, because maybe that's become a new resource in their tool belt to think about, and they no longer are adjusting processes. But I guess I just caution here. Hopefully, people are building some of these processes in a way that are more flexible, because as AI is changing and as different models are improving and things are adjusting, hopefully people are building their processes in a way that you can swap things in and out as the world changes.
And just quickly, what struck me about thank you. What struck me about it is that actually, can you go back one more? The implementing business process improvements actually kind of encapsulates most of the other action items on this list, like cost containment and savings. Like that's a component of improving business process. Generative AI, Diane, to your point, you have to have your processes in place in order to layer on new technologies like generative AI, Gen AI or agentic AI, operational excellence, contracting. All of these kind of fall into that bucket. So like you, Diane, it's really heartening for me to see everybody looking at that, the kind of importance of process improvement across the spectrum of activities in a law department and the entire organization.
Agreed. So what we ask, moving on for a second, what we ask basically, what is your legal ops function responsible for? And in a lot of ways, this is sort of the data-based adjacency to like the clock 12 functions wheel, or legalops.com has their 15 practice areas, but the answer is a lot. I mean, these are a lot of different things for any one function to handle, especially considering that we ask them we ask what they expect to happen to their legal ops team, and while a third say that they're planning to grow their legal ops team, most say that there's no room for growth. They're not getting any more headcount. So just looking at these two pieces of data sort of in concert, Chase, like you got all these things that you're responsible for, and you're not getting any more people to do them with. So, like, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully AI will help. I'd have to caution, and we'll get to this in a bit, but not the quite the turnkey solution still for that. But maybe just flip back to the last one, Brad. I think thinking about some of the pieces of this work, like this is a good place to start really thinking about some holistic solutions that you could put in place to kind of cover some of these levers. So we're not spinning our wheels, trying to recreate the wheel every time. If something has a solution that's there, if it's incorporated some AI already, you can be kind of checking a few boxes at the same time, right? Where you're getting stuff off the plate of your internal team, implementing AI, getting it to deliver back actually metrics and reporting that you need and feed into like a more holistic model. You can spend your time there. I think if you're trying to tackle all of these things and tackle them with your business process improvements over the next year, and all at the same time, it is going to be a little stretched without being able to add some headcounts on. So thinking about your partners and your some more managed service offerings that you might be able to get to take on the easier stuff in the short term.
I think you're right, Chase. If I look at the responsibilities, it also includes that technology deployment and the technology selection. And so it doesn't have to be tech that's going to be used directly in your environment. It can be tech that's used on your behalf. And so you might be able to consolidate a look at your workflows and your processes and partnering with someone to handle services and have them deploy the technology in the delivery of that service capability. I know it's something we look at whenever we're supporting clients. And that's the type of thing that I think people can use as a lever to address this broad range of things to have to accomplish in a year.
Yeah. One of the things I like to remind myself of is that you don't have to automate 100% of a process to get meaningful 10x value in it, right? So like if you take contract management as just like a simple, easy example, right? So like say just the process of running red lines on your contracts for the week used to take you an hour or so to run through your 20 contracts to understand how does this play against my standard and what changes do I need to make, and make me a first draft of where my changes should go. That's just one component of your total responsibility where you can give yourself an hour back here, an hour back there, and that really does cascade sort of across your legal operations department. And when you combine that with what Diane is talking about in terms of expecting the same from your outside service providers to give that same value back, you really do get sort of compounding benefits from a sort of overarching management perspective of how you use not only the resources that you have, but the resources that your partners do.
Yeah.
And
I think, go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, I was just going to take a slightly different tack. I think what this shows us is that the legal operations profession is changing, evolving, and maturing. As we can see here, it definitely is a kind of interdepartmental or interdisciplinary function. So legal ops professionals today really have to be multi-tool players. They have to be technologists and SMEs. And I think it's challenging to find all of that in one person or even a small group of people. So I'm curious what everybody's thoughts are on kind of as a profession, it kind of branching out into sort of expertise in a particular field along this spectrum.
I think this is where you do have an opportunity to leverage partners that can supplement your expertise and bring in experience in areas where you might not have it. And especially if it's a longstanding partner, they should be able to know your environment and be able to help you, introduce some of these capabilities, supplement your own internal skill set, and point you to things that they're working with.
Yeah, Danielle, I'd say too, to tee off on your point, I think at least like the business that I'm responsible for is more around helping companies make sense of all their signed contracts. So, typically you think of the legal use cases, right? And I think that was where a lot of the opportunities and discussions started. Now I do see a lot more like partnerships with business units where you're kind of targeting an actual like, hey, well, what are we doing with this data besides just what's the start date and end date, and the risk of the contract is like, how can we get information out of it so we can make a better decision about, optimizing revenue or, reducing spend or whatever it might be. So I think to your point, maybe, people are starting to think of legal unlocking more of those business first processes and value opportunities. So I like that point.
Agreed.
I like this personally. It's sort of like the growth of the professionalization of the function itself over time. So like what it really reminds me of is effectively what law firms went through in the 90s in terms of the professionalization of operations and sort of adding the C-suite to law firm management or what have you. I do tend to think about responsibility and how those things get effectuated sort of along the similar lines of I kind of combine org design and tech design. Like what are the capabilities and skills that I need to optimally run this organization? I do think that I'm seeing more and more of people that are picking fastballs, for lack of a better way to describe it, in technology or finance and data. And so for me, it boils down to those three buckets. Like you kind of need effectively your legal department CTO, your legal department CFO, and then general operations lead. How you fulfill that capability can be done in any number of ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be done on an FTE basis. It can be done through a spectrum of providers that deeply understand your business and provide the consistent results that you expect.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and I think that one thing we don't talk about very much and probably should more is about executive level management and leadership among legal ops professionals, right? Like there are things that a legal ops professional knows how to do and loves to do. Maybe that's around matter management or AI, or maybe that's around law firm management. And there's no reason not to keep that part of the job in-house and maybe even with the leader of the organization. But so much value can be gained from outside service providers, from partners, from consultants, from other folks within the business. I mean, you could be relying on the finance people in your finance department a whole lot more maybe than you already are. But that takes leadership and executive management skills. And I'm not sure that enough legal ops people are thinking about themselves as just executives that need to be able to manage a function like that. And I don't think that's surprising considering where legal ops is on its overall growth curve, but I also think it's probably time.
If you can get someone like that, Brad, it also obviously helps with the buy-in, right? Because you're getting folks outside of legal to support initiatives and to drive things forward, and you're actually giving something of value back that drives the business forward. So you might be able to get some of those projects funded a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to influence without there's a phrase for it that I can't come up with, but the ability to influence without being the top of the organization is really important, right? Like you might not have the influence without power, I think is the phrase. Like getting the folks in finance to do what you want them to do without being able to just direct them to do what you want them to do is a really important skill.
Soft power in diplomatic terms, right?
Right. This is where your donuts and pizzas come into play, by the way.
I think it's also where your data is coming into play. The better your metrics, the better your reporting, the more detailed data you have, the better analysis you can do, the more persuasive you are, the more meaningful your contribution to those conversations. You're going to have more impact.
So let's move on for a minute and talk a little bit more about not so much challenges, but KPIs for legal profession, for legal ops. One, everyone believes that the industry needs standard KPIs, or at least almost everybody does. 91% believe that the industry needs standard KPIs. But then when we ask, what are your KPIs? All over the place, right? So not, and by the way, we cut off this chart when we got to 6%. There's even a longer, like, so you could read it, but there's even a longer tail of more KPIs, and that's even before you get to the what's in the others. So Danielle, like, what's interesting is that so many of these on the far left anyway are spend or cost related in different ways. Like if we just consolidated those and been like a cost metric of some kind, it would be far and away the winner. But outcomes have become increasingly important to legal ops people, sort of moving them from what used to be like, we're the business people, we're the process people, it's the lawyers who worry about the outcomes, to it being the number one KPI for legal ops folks. So what does that mean?
I think it's a realization that legal can and has provided significant value to the business. To an organization, it might not be understood across the organization. Oh, okay, we win this. This is a great outcome. This is going to impact it all. The rest of the org. But I think that's where it's going. But when I saw this slide and considered what you just said about the KPIs are all over the place, that kind of goes back to the previous slide that we just saw. What are the capabilities of the legal ops professional? What are the legal ops professionals responsible for? That is also all over the place. So I am very curious where we all end up on what are the standard KPIs we're going to go after. I thought it was really interesting that it was like 90% said yes, we need KPIs, but like, what are they? What are they going to be? It's everything. I also thought it was interesting that the top of the list, it kind of relates to outcomes of legal matters, but I thought it was interesting that the top of the list wasn't customer satisfaction. At the end of the day, legal serves the business, and the business is the client. And I would think that would top the list of a KPI. And maybe that is encapsulated into outcomes of legal matters. But yeah, would love to hear everybody else's take on it.
Brad, I think I'm going to be a contrarian. I don't believe we do need standard KPIs. I think we need a base of KPIs that everybody is going to care about, and they sort of surface here, and it's going to be something around spend. But I don't think you can take an organization that is large and mature and say that the KPIs for that are going to be the same as an organization that's in an early startup phase or a high growth phase. They're all going to have very different needs. The industries are going to drive very different needs. So I think it's more important that people tune into what are the relevant metrics for the position that my organization is in, for the position that my industry is in, and am I measuring to the things that are going to make an impact in my space? And it doesn't have to be the same as what everyone else measures across the board in legal ops. Yes, there's going to be some overlap with spend management and things like that, but I don't think they have to be the same. I don't think we need to standardize. I think we need to be focused on what am I contributing, and am I measuring good contribution, whatever space I'm in.
I think that's super important. And I want to say, like, particularly, like, think about what the impact of AI means from sort of an organic moment for a legal operations executive to integrate into the broader organization. So like you're in a space where your whole organization needs to transform, right? And all of a sudden you're at center stage of what are we allowed to do, coach? So you kind of have this sort of really unique opportunity, not only to take part in it, but to kind of lead by example. And by virtue of that, you open up access to a lot more investment across your organization as well. And I couldn't agree more in terms of measure yourself like your business. Like what stuck out to me here is I only have really one metric that's kind of more value based, and the rest of it is sort of blocking and tackling dollars and cents. I think yes, you are an administrative function. You're going to have to measure that, but how can I use the power of something like AI and more integrated data management to start understanding how, like, what's the cost to enter a new market from legal's perspective? What's our speed to market from a new product perspective? Like, how do we actually get involved into sales velocity and improve that metric? And how do we help our supply chain professionals execute on the same? So like when you sort of democratize what used to be very siloed systems with the power of what LLMs can very quickly do, by bringing that data to it, I hope that we start to see more of that. And to your exact point of, I want to see KPIs that show up on the balance sheet, because I think that's what you have an opportunity to impact.
It's back to that influence and that soft influence. Data is powerful in giving you soft influence. And I really think what that prior slide is telling us in saying that they think there should be standardized KPIs is what they're really saying is give me some help to what my KPIs should be. How should I measure this stuff? I mean, the number 4 item on the next slide is number of legal or innovative legal service delivery. How do you measure that? How do you measure innovative legal service delivery? Well, I mean, I'm sure there are ways you could come up with that are creative to be able to center around that, but that's only relevant if it's important to what you're delivering against in your value proposition for your business. So I think it's a misnomer to say we need all standard KPIs or we should be shooting for that. Let's shoot for meaningful data and insightful data in whatever circumstance you're collecting it and for whatever metric is going to be relevant to your stakeholders.
Yeah. And oh, go ahead.
No, go for it, Danielle.
Oh, kind of building off of Heath's point, and everybody's point, KPI should reflect the bottom line. One of them here, contracts negotiated and executed. I mean, that in and of itself as a KPI is like, nah, okay. What does that mean? You need the underlying information, like, okay, what does it mean to turn contracts faster? What does it mean to your procurement department, your supply chain, your revenue generation? That's the important stuff. Like just the sheer numbers is like, all right, that's, I guess, interesting, but you got to peel the onion back a little bit further.
Well, contracts negotiated and executed is an excellent example, Danielle, because you could be measuring that. And in some organizations, it's a good thing if that number is going up. In other organizations, it's a bad thing if that number is going up. They want that number to go down. They want fewer negotiations, more standard paper. So it's a metric, but it's not necessarily the same target for both organizations. Depends on what you're chasing. That's why I don't think you can standardize this, but you can focus it on where you add value.
So we got a really interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I tend to agree, and I love your point, Diane, too. If some of these are just like impossible to measure, even like outcomes of legal matters is like, oh, that was a good outcome or a bad outcome. Like you kind of have to define that a little bit more, or you don't see risk showing up here, but like legal is known as like the risk manage, to manage risk, and like it's a little tough to quantify. I would say starting with some industry benchmarks, however high you want to keep them, I think it is very helpful because it gives you something that you could benchmark against. I'm just trying to think of like something for contracts, like dollars per contract or, entered into or something like that. So like, you don't have to get into is outside counsel the right way to do it? Is an ALSP the right way to do it? Is in-house counsel the right way to do it? But like, how much does it cost us to put a contract in place, at least to have a reference benchmark before you could even start to think about like, oh, it's because our industry, oh, it's because we have no negotiation leverage. Like there's definitely things that are going to make it unique to your company and could have explain why you're so far off. And then over time, maybe we can get to like more detailed benchmarks. But, just having like when you start working with law departments and trying to think about where there are some opportunities to improve things, if you don't have something you could latch onto to say, hey, as an industry, we're seeing companies that, that they're tracking these things and here's where their numbers are coming out, it makes it a bit hard to then push through some of the initiatives as you're trying to, solve your business outcomes. But in the short term, how can we get funding to solve some of our like immediate projects?
We have an interesting question from the audience that I want us to tackle now if we can. And I'll answer first, give you guys a minute to think. But do we think legal departments have done a good job of explaining what the business should expect? I'm not sure customer satisfaction drives the current outcomes. I think that's a really good question. And I also wonder, so I'd like you guys to take a crack at that, but I also wonder if like GCs have done a good job of explaining what the law department should be expecting from legal ops? I mean, we started the survey in 2008. The answer to that question was a resounding yes, because there wasn't like a trend of legal ops. It was like a GC saying, why are we spending so much more than I think we should on outside counsel, or whatever the problem was? Who can we find to get in here that can help us solve that problem? And it was very like organic and problem solving, where I feel like that's sort of been lost to some extent over the years, through the trend of legal ops, where a lot of law departments are like, we're supposed to have legal ops. I can get headcount for that. That's a role I'm supposed to have, as opposed to this like steely eyed, like, this is what we have them for. This is what they're supposed to do. So what do you guys think? Do you think GCs are communicating decently in either direction, either downward towards the legal ops folks or upward towards the business, to help them understand what they should be expecting?
I think the GCs that have been given good data to help them do a good job of messaging. I think the ones that are struggling are the ones that their organizations are not producing the underlying information for them to make a meaningful case to their constituencies. They can only share and persuade based on factual information, and there's nothing less persuasive than just a colloquial, this is how we think it's going, as opposed to, we've got numbers that show this and this and this and this. And so the better we measure, the better our GCs are at communicating. And I think the good organizations that are out there are doing a good job of communicating because they've got something to say.
Yeah, I don't. I'd say a lawyer answer and say it depends. Because what this really is an executive skill set of storytelling. And when you think about sort of the psychology of lawyers and their reluctance to be measured. So like if you think about law firms, oh, don't ask the client what they think of me. I couldn't possibly bear getting any feedback that's negative, and just don't want to sort of rock the boat type of thing. I wonder if that created sort of, historical propensity to just sort of deliver on numbers only and not be able to tell like what you actually do, how you actually did it, and why it actually matters. So I do think that in a lot of ways, legal ops professionals can sort of help push the trend, because it's just a different skill set that they're in a better situation to sort of harness that data, and unpack it from the perspective of both the business and the perspective of the legal department. Like net promoter scores are only going to say but so much, right? So like what you really want to understand is how you partner, how you help people deliver. So I think it's actually a pretty meaningful opportunity for legal ops executives.
I can speak anecdotally. Agiloft is a CLM company, and we've seen CLM kind of branch out of legal tech and really kind of become enterprise tech. But the law department is right there. The law department is always a partner, is always a part of the conversation. And I think that says a lot about where law departments see themselves and see their value to the business. So I think to answer the question, I don't think that we would see that if savvy GCs weren't effectively communicating their role in the process.
So let me
I think, Brad, just for me too, from what I've seen, I like to the it depends point. I mean, at some companies, legal ops functions are so well established, and this comes out other places in your survey. And then you would expect to see a better communication of what people are doing there, and you'd expect to see better justifications for where people are spending their time and how they're driving value. But if it was someone like you mentioned, Brad, where it's like, hey, I need to have a legal ops role, let me check the box, just putting someone in their seat, I think you're probably more likely to not see things communicated so well to get the value demonstrated to the business on the role.
Yeah. I'm going to be the voice of my friend Catherine Cho, who actually asked that original question because she had a comment as well. What Catherine doesn't realize is that she's volunteering to be on our next webinar. But what she says is that, and I agree with her, I think it needs to start before we even get to data. Most people don't have a theory, and I think that's right. I'm not sure that enough GCs are really setting objectives properly. Like forget about what we need. Like this is what we're trying to do. Like I have a theory that we're overspending on outside counsel. Let's go figure that out and solve it. And I think Catherine's right. I'm not sure there's enough objective setting before you even get to like what the data tells you if you're right or wrong in your hypothesis.
I would say to GC's defense, some of them are fantastic storytellers, right? Like if you have amazing expert litigators or what have you that have really honed in on that ability to sort of bring a jury along on a journey. But I think most of them weren't taught this skill set in law school, right? Like how do I actually like design a business from a business perspective? How do I tell the story of what I add in value to the overall arching corporation and improve shareholder value, right? It's a new muscle. So it just takes me back to, yeah, it's a space. It's a space where I think, your utility knife type of players can play well.
I wonder if
Let's
having
just
those
make
industry KPIs might not help here, Brad, before you're making hypotheses about, whether we're spending too much or not. Like, is there actually some standard that someone has come up with to,
yeah,
that I could latch on to a little bit?
that'd be interesting.
It makes
Yeah,
you
Heath,
wonder if the outcome of legal matters it rises to the top because it is by nature a storytelling metric. It's
Yeah.
it's the metric that is, kind of here's what happened in this cat matter. Here's how we got it to be a good place. It tells its own story. So maybe that's part of what makes it among the top three because it's effective.
I
that's
like
right. And I just want to point out, I was using legal spend as an example there. Like your objective could be to get your contracting under control, or to be, like it would. I was just, but I think I still think you got to start. So Heath, you made me laugh a minute ago because almost every lawyer I know, when you say, "Why did you become a lawyer?" They're just like, "Well, my parents said I was good at arguing, like when I was a kid." Like that. That's always the answer, right? And then what you're saying is, but they're, but when it comes to like arguing for more budget, or they, like somewhere between deciding to go to law school because they were good at arguing as a kid and graduating from law school and becoming a GC, they've lost that skill.
Yeah.
Unless they're a trial lawyer, in which case they certainly retained it. So I want to move on, kind of the time, to how we can use some thoughts about how we can use technology and data to for positive impact here. So one thing I want to start, one place I want to start here with is that, and for readability, we cut most of the technologies out of the slide, but we kept these on purpose, and they're representative. On a scale of 1 to 10, most of the technology is rated as effectiveness between 6 and 8 tops. Here's some examples: enterprise legal management 6.4, contract management 6.6 or 6.7, depending on which side of the SIG you're on. Document assembly 6.0, knowledge management 6.0. Diane, help it, like, I mean, maybe speak to some of these, and speak to enterprise legal management in specific if you can, but more importantly, like, why is the answer to this question year after year meh?
I think partly because these technologies are trying to be all things to all people. And it's a very difficult charter to go after. It speaks to the differentiation between organizations and what they're really needing and need to do with their business processes. And so they're trying to take a very standardized application and then try and drive it into a much more customized environment. And the degree to which they're able to do that is reflected in their opinion of how the technology is playing out. And I think that's the struggle, that it's just very difficult to make these one square peg fit into all the various round holes that are out there. And so it's whether it's enterprise legal management that is truly taking on everything, or something very focused like document assembly. It surprises me actually that document assembly is the lower one, because I would have thought that was actually more something the technology should be able to do for everybody pretty easily, but it may be they're just not applying it. To me, this is just a function of trying to take a very standardized application and fit customized environments, and it's hard. It's just hard.
Yeah, maybe Brad too. I'll take a bit positive maybe stance on the lower numbers. I think you don't have it on screen, but what is it? The e-signature is what, 8.5 or something like that. So I feel like people have in their mind like this idea of how easy it is. You like push a button, you sign a document, and it goes through a workflow, and everyone's happy. So then maybe we're like calibrating a bit below that. I took a skim back to last year's numbers also, and for these specific ones, it looks like we're actually up 25 or 30%. You could check me on that, Brad. But I think last year we had automation at 4.8, post-execution contract management at 5.1, and pre-execution contract management at 5.3. So it's like 25 to 30% jump. Maybe people are seeing some benefits from like LLMs getting integrated into these tools that at least they think it's more helpful. I know a lot of the tools have like put it into your Word plugin and you could like get a clause right there, or at least get something out of it. So maybe that explains some of it. It'd be interesting to see in a couple, in a year or so if that number would hold up. And I couldn't agree more with Diane on something like document assembly. I think it's people just not being prepared to implement the technologies that they're buying, perhaps, because there's nothing in document assembly that should make it anything but a 10. Personally, when I was in-house, we had a very successful document automation implementation, and that was like 10 years ago. All the time we see clients go live with that. It's literally logic. Like you push the button and the right document comes out. So you haven't kind of done something right setting up your templates or process for that if it's not working for you.
Yeah, Chase, I just want to say last year's numbers were lower than typical. These numbers are more like what we've seen over the years. So I think your analysis is right or close to right. I actually think last year's were depressed because it was, wait, why isn't all this stuff working as easily as ChatGPT works for me? And now a year later, people
Now
are
it's
like,
integrated.
okay, well, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. It's not supposed to be that easy, and they've rebounded a little bit.
I think there's another factor here too, in that a lot of these applications, there's a lot of hope that you can just put it in and it's going to run. And these are, you're not building statues, you're building robots. They've got to be maintained, they've got to be supported, they have to be evolved over time. And so investing in that post implementation support capability is a really big factor. And a lot of organizations don't staff the role to do that. They spread out the responsibility for it across whoever has a moment to handle this or a moment to handle that, and it never gets cohesive. So if you're going to put in the time to launch it properly, put in the time to keep it up, because your happiness and use of it is going to decrease over time if you're not maintaining it and investing in that support.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add, go ahead, Danielle.
Oh, I was just going to build on what Chase was saying about, I think it was Chase, about, the importance of like optimizing the technology for its intended purpose. Looking at post-execution contract management, obviously that's a really important function, which is like a flip side of the coin to how effective the technology is. I don't think anybody would argue that function is critically important. But making sure that the technology is connected, like in this case, CLM is connected to adjacent commercial systems, that's kind of a critically important aspect of making that technology as effective as possible, to making sure that the data is flowing bidirectionally from the contract repository to other functions like ERP systems and things like that. And I don't think we've reached the level of maturity yet in organizations to really see the true effectiveness of the technology in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm. And we'll move on a second just before we do. I do think that our audience are hard graders on the, think about, Chase, you pointed out that e-signature is our leader and they get an 8.4. And I was thinking about that. All these signatures, you get an email, you click two things and you've executed your contract and it immediately emails back a fully executed version. And and even that only gets, and it always works and there's never any hassle, almost, right? And even that only gets an 8.4. What exactly, how exactly do these people want do they want their tech to work? I mean,
I don't know. How hard is it to add another signature on that form? That really ticks me off.
All right, now we found who's bringing the average down.
This actually gives me some hope. In terms of realism, if I connect these dots with business process being at the top and technology management being at the top in terms of responsibility, that to me shows maturation of this profession as well. Like at the end of the day,
Mhm.
all and I absolutely love. I wrote it down, Diane. You're building robots, not statues. All technology actually does is hold the decisions that you make at the end of the day, and it's only going to go but so far. And if you don't continue to invest in its development and its customization, like it's just going to fall flat no matter what you do. It's like giving someone a car without telling them how to drive it.
So let's dig into Gen AI a little bit better, a little bit deeper, I think. And uh, I don't know if there's anything really worth talking about here, but I do think it's interesting that almost all of our respondents think that Gen AI will become either an essential or at least a real benefit, an optional benefit to the legal profession. Nobody says it will not impact our profession at all. I think we all agree with that. Um, Most of our audience is primarily responsible or influential in terms of the Gen AI driven tools that take place that may or may not be coming into the law department. So again, no huge surprise here, but legal ops folks are at the cutting edge of this stuff. Um, this is a little more interesting and maybe a little more discussion worthy. We ask what types of Gen AI tools are being used within the law department. And while there's a decent number of contract specific tools, far and away the leader is just foundation models. You know, we're talking about Copilot and GPT, and the and now this survey was in the field a few months ago. It was back last October. This is so things may have changed some, but the self-service generators and especially the legal specific domains like Harvey um, don't don't seem to have gained nearly as much traction as just the use of foundation models like GPT and the I'm guessing that those folks that pumped $300 million into Harvey yesterday maybe didn't see this data before they did it, or reason to believe that they can improve on that. But I don't know, Chase, you want to start us here? Like, why is it so much easier? Why is it? What's going on here? Why is it so much easier to use these foundation models? And is it a smart thing to do as opposed to bringing in legal specific tools?
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for teeing that up. And I'd say obviously these models are just so accessible to everyone, right? So
Mhm.
that's probably why it explains just everyone has these like in-house, I think, available to them in one capacity or another. And if nothing else, getting it to summarize a document or bounce an email off it. I'd say when thinking about how those would actually fit into your end solution for the problem you're trying to solve, and I could look at contract review for post-signature analysis in particular. We spent a lot of time just like comparing the different foundational models to see what results would look like. Just some high level findings for some things like extracting key terms from contracts, like something like a document title. I know this is very basic, but ML used to do it fairly decently, machine learning models, but LLMs are like really knocking this one out of the park for us. So we kind of get really, really high accuracy rates, like in the high 90s that we weren't seeing before. I'd say some of these models as well are able to do things that you just couldn't do with machine learning models. The basic one that comes up in contract review is just distinguishing between one company and its counterparty. A lot of the machine learning models would just pull out like all the parties to the agreement, and it wasn't all that helpful because you still have to do some work. But finding just some really good results coming back of just even being able to distinguish that, like upwards of like the 90% range on that as well. I'd say as we get into like some of the more detailed testing, and this was across GPT 4.0, GPT 4.0 Mini, Llama 370B, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. You do see a bunch of variation there in the results. This would be like asking you to do something like don't just extract the clause from a contract, but then interpret that clause and tell me whether someone has a right or an obligation within that clause or a specific one. And you start to just see things really range across the board there. Anywhere from like downwards of like 50% for some of the models for some of the things we asked it to do, and then again approaching back into like the upper 90s. So what we've been seeing, and maybe why people are thinking of spending their time on foundational models, is It's going to kind of depend what you're asking it to do, and just picking like one horse or one to go with, but just might not make the most sense. And the new models do keep getting rolled out, and we're seeing a lot of improvement from one to the next. Once you kind of take those models and then do some tweaking or making them specific for your use case, like some of these other tools might have done, you're kind of losing a layer of that customization to update your prompt, know exactly what it says, adjust it over time from learnings. So maybe that's explaining some of it, Brent.
I do think there's some safety in places like Microsoft Copilot. People feel like I can dabble there without getting myself in trouble. My IT team has blessed this environment. I'm good to go. And so it's a nice, comfortable place to get started. And I think that would drive that number up considerably. Not surprised that the contract specific tools are right behind it. All of the major players have introduced AI in some capacity within the tool itself. But the ease of the foundation models to come in a specific step without upending all of your process, without asking you to redo your process steps, makes it the logical point to bring it in. But I think it tracks back to that whole earlier slide that talked about we're starting with business processes because we realize we can't stay with what we're doing now. It's going to have to get more sophisticated, and looking at the processes is what's going to get us there. And then as you introduce the thought of agentic and all of the agent building and such, that really starts to touch into your actual processes. So the fact that people are looking at processes along with starting with foundational models, these two start to come together when you have the agentic model, and you're going to be using these LLMs, but in a process-driven thought and process incorporation. So I think this is very logical what we're seeing. I do believe that some of the changes we have seen with the Harvey LexisNexis piece, and I think what you'll see is some more consolidation in that area, is going to drive that one up considerably, because you have more a better linkage. Right now, Harvey does one thing, LexisNexis does something else. Bringing them together is a combination that does more. That kind of combination in a couple different players in that space is going to drive that percentage up a lot.
For me, I think this just speaks to accessibility. Like when you think about how much a corporate legal department has at their disposal, and you think about how Harvey's going to make that, to be valuation, expensive. It's gonna cost a few dollars, right? Yeah, 300 million for 5B, my bad. But you're asking your customer to buy how many things to be able to achieve a like output. So they already have CLM tools, and those are easier add-ons from an accessibility perspective. The corporation is experimenting with ChatGPT or Copilot, so they have the ability to integrate themselves into those items. But what I do see is it's a pretty unique opportunity to sort of build your scalable skill sets that lead you to that agentic sort of future. And that was one of the earlier questions we had in the Q&A. Like, do we think next year that we'll see agentic AI be a priority? I'll be curious to see. What I will say is what I see across a customer base is there's a very wide range of where people actually are versus where the technology is. So by and large, you'll go to places like Clock or otherwise, and people are still starting out their ChatGPT journey versus others that might be talking about, I'm building my agent workforce. I do think it's a spectrum, but I will say the sort of the readily availableness of it, like the ease in which anybody can access that, I think will accelerate how quickly it is focused on and how quickly it is talked about. And I will say that you tend to tap out on the chat assistant once you've played in ChatGPT. You really do start to get that hunger for workflow, and that is where you get into the more agentic starts of crafting from an architecture perspective.
So guys, we're running low on time, and I want to give everyone a minute for a final thought. But I do want to share this slide and see if anyone has any quick thoughts on this. We're starting to see some pretty good numbers in terms of use cases. I mean, if you look at the black and the dark green, where folks are always or sometimes using Gen AI or GPT in the following use cases. a lot of them are pretty close to that 50% number. There's a couple that are below and a couple that are right above, but it does feel like we are. And when you add in considering, it's really, the numbers are really robust in most places. So I think it's really interesting that maybe not surprising 2.5 years after the official public launch of GPT and when this all exploded, but we are starting to see use case adoption throughout the businesses. So we have a few slides real quick that I'm just going to whip through for you all on reporting and metrics. And then I'm going to ask each of our panelists for like a final word or a final really intelligent, important thought for everybody. So think about that for the next minute or two while I tell a little story here about metrics and reporting. We ask folks if business units make effective use of the information that they provide, the metrics that they provide. Most do not. So most legal ops people say that you're providing metrics. Business unit does not. The business units do not make effective use of what you're telling them. Even worse, you feel like law firms are not making effective use of the information that metrics provide. So you're coming up with metrics. You're trying to evaluate them. Are they making effective use of that? They are not. Well, that probably makes sense because when we ask, do you have consistent metrics that you use to evaluate your outside counsel and your ALSPs? No, you do not. When we ask, do you share with your outside counsel and ALSPs the metrics on which you are evaluated as legal ops person or your law department is evaluated? No, you do not. This makes the least sense to me of all, right? Like you're asking these people to be your partners and you're not giving them the tools to help you. You're not like if I was an outside law firm and I knew that you were being evaluated on the number of contracts that you get negotiated and executed each year, I would make sure to try to help you, like make you look good. You're going to keep sending business to me. But yet we're not sharing with outside counsel and making it not surprising here. And this is, I think, the last slide in this vein. How often do you regularly meet with your outside counsel? 3% weekly, 3% monthly, everything else quarterly or infrequently. And then there's that ad hoc bucket, which is those are always uncomfortable meetings, right? Because that means something's going awry. So whether they're through regularly scheduled meetings or something else, I highly recommend work more closely with your in-house counsel, work more closely with your ALSPs, help them understand what you're being evaluated on, what your metrics are. I'm a big believer in maybe tying them to their metrics, bonuses, those sorts of things. I think those are all good, but if that's too much, just make sure they understand and that they're going to be evaluated within your organization based upon how much they help you do what you are trying to get done. And I'm sorry, one more. Do legal ops people have compensation ramifications based upon the law department's effectiveness and their metrics? No. So if you believe what gets measured gets done is true, I believe that, but I also believe that what gets paid for gets done. And we're not seeing a whole lot of compensation ramifications around law department metrics. So final thought for each of you, please just throw this as maybe a starting point for those. Who's going to be the primary driver of innovation and change in the legal sector? Is it going to be, most legal ops people think that it's going to be legal ops. I'm not so sure. I think some of you think this is more true than not, but answer any way you like. We have 30 seconds each. What does our audience need to know? Diane.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't know that you were going to call on people in order. So I was thinking about this. I'm going to quote the great Heath Harris from about 10 minutes ago. Heath, you said the technology holds the decisions we make. And I thought that was absolutely spot on. And for law departments, I think, they have to recognize and do recognize that more and more of those decisions are cross-functional and have impacts across the organization. So that's my takeaway that law departments, for the past 20 years, we've been talking about how law departments can provide value to the organization. We'll still be talking about that for the next 20 years. But I think it's really becoming a reality now, and it's exciting to see. And part of it is the technology and the business process that we've been talking about all day today, because those are not it's not law department technology. It's not law department business process. It's tech and processes that impact the entire organization. So I'm here for it.
I'm going to second Danielle. I think the technology is going to remain the catalyst because there's just so much momentum in the market right now. But legal ops is going to have to be the agent for change, and they need to step up and take on the agency.
I love it. Yeah, and I'd say the same thing, catalyst or spark for change, definitely the tech. While we're all spending our time thinking about whether this is solving our problem, hopefully people are defining what their expected output and result is going to be. And then you can compare that against to what comes out when you push the magic button. And then hopefully we can kind of integrate that output and realize there might be some more work that has to get done to get your actual output.
All I would add is wherever you are on the AI maturity tech spectrum or what have you, learning and experimentation are free. And use that to build the story of what your legal department is going to look like and what you'll measure.
And I'll take the last one, and I'm amplifying some of the things you guys were just saying. When your GC or when senior business leadership in the company come to the law department and say, are we using AI? What should we be doing with AI? What you should be hearing is, they've just given me permission and maybe budget to solve a problem that we need to solve. So think in terms, like answer the question they ask, but think in terms of that. There's your opportunity. Go run with it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody on the faculty. Thank you, everybody who attended today. The report is a free download. It's at ldo17.com. Please go grab it if you haven't seen it already. And thanks again. And we look forward to our 18th annual report in a few months.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Guys.
Thank you.